Our country is under attack from within by critical race theory. And Judicial Watch has made it a priority to expose it and stop it wherever we can. This is kind of fun. I want to tell you something. People say, well, how is it you decide what to do at Judicial Watch? How do you decide what to investigate? You know, how do you find out about all this stuff? You know how we found out about most of the stuff we want to investigate? We read the newspaper. I mean, this city is so corrupt, but on top of its corruption is the corruption of it being in plain sight and no one doing anything about it. And Judicial Watch is kind of has been the guy, you know, from the old fable, you know, the emperor has no clothes. We say, what's going on here? Why isn't there an investigation? And so often we read something in the newspaper, or I say newspaper, it kind of dates me, right? I'm older than I care to admit to. But we're online and we see this information, and you'd be surprised how few people actually follow up on what is likely to be evidence of corruption or government misconduct and abuse. And so in the case of this next story, I was reading in the Washington Post about the DC schools' efforts to upgrade or change or update their social studies curriculum. And they were using language, I don't remember specifically, that made me think, oh, this sounds like it's going to be full of critical race theory. Sure enough, I went and looked at the document. I looked at it for literally 1 minute and passed it along to my colleagues, who examined it more closely and did an excellent report exposing how DC public schools plan to overhaul their social studies curriculum with CRT, anti-Americanism, and leftist propaganda, starting from kindergarten through children being a senior in high school. It's a great story, and what I love about it is we didn't have to file a FOIA lawsuit. We just went to the DC government website, and they have helpfully posted their draft for public comment social studies standards that they put up there in December of last year, December 16, 2022. So all the proof is here. I encourage you to read it. You're going to be outraged, especially since you, as a U.S. citizen, I think, have a right to have some say in the way our nation's capital is run. At least constitutionally you have that right, because Congress has plenary authority over the way the District of Columbia is run. So everything I'm complaining about now is happening because of the sufferance of Congress, which is supposed to be responsible for the nation's capital and its governance. And as we highlight, to address the perceptions of white Western bias in curricula, public schools surrounding the nation's capital are revamping social studies courses for all students with critical race theory, anti-Americanism, and a multitude of leftist propaganda. And the new District of Columbia Public Schools social studies standards include teaching kindergartners about gender identity, second graders about same-sex relationships, and gender fluidity in civilizations. And I just love how they use these words as if there's anything meaningful to, they're meaningful to anyone outside of the crazed Marxist extremists that are setting up these standards to abuse our children with. Fifth graders about queer culture, and sixth graders about harmful border policies and how racism, privilege, and bias affect the distribution of resources. Critical race theory, queer theory, all being taught from kindergarten through high school. And you know, DC public schools are one of the worst in the nation, as we point out in this Corruption Chronicles blog piece. So I encourage you to go often to our Corruption Chronicles blog on our website at judicialwatch.org. And we also have our investigative bulletin blog. And those places we do journalism on government corruption that frankly a lot of other media follow our leads on. We break news on government corruption. In addition to just doing our litigation and investigations, we do this basic journalism as I'm talking about. And so this is an important piece. I've already shared it with Congress because I think Congress needs to get on it. But DC is one of the worst schools. They run one of the worst school systems in America. It has one of the lowest math, reading, and standardized test scores, as well as an outrageously high dropout rate. A few years ago, the DC State Board of Education revealed in a study that the teacher turnover rate is much higher than the national average, And for instance, it's nearly 20% of teachers leave each year. 55% quit after 5 years. And most schools don't keep a principal for more than 5 years. So our schools are a mess here in DC. And I just think of this, the children who are deprived of a basic education that would give them the sort of functional literacy and other academic skills necessary for them to succeed in society, and they're denied that almost annually here in a way that is just heartbreaking. But on top of that, these bureaucrats don't care about that, right? And that's not heartbreaking, that's scandalous and outrageous. And you see what's in this curriculum. And I encourage you, don't listen to me, don't listen to our Corruption Chronicles blog. I encourage you to go and look at the document. We're going to provide a link to it here. And it's 160 pages or so of their agenda, their propaganda, critical race theory agenda that is based on anti-Americanism, racialism and racism, segregation. Yes, the left likes segregation now, in case you haven't noticed. And as I say, this queer theory agenda, which is trying to engage in sex talk, essentially, with young children in DC public schools. So this began back in 2019. The leftists decided to do a revamp of the curriculum. They, in 2019, they began to overhaul the subjects to promote more culturally relevant instruction for students in the nation's capital. What do you mean culturally relevant? How is reading, writing, and arithmetic culturally relevant? And they wanted to address perceptions of white Western bias in curricula. What is Western bias? The foundations of Western civilization, there's bias in teaching kids about that. The foundations of America, that's just anti-American Marxist claptrap. So you now know, and there's more here, but you can see what they were up to, and what they came up with is outrageous. And I'm going to read you our analysis. It's a great summary. Besides gender identity, kindergartners will learn to understand their racial, ethnic, and religious identities. In first grade, kids will identify a leader who has made their community more just and inclusive. So they're trying to define any conservative out. Second graders will analyze the daily lives of different individuals in ancient societies, including histories of same-sex relationships and, as I said, gender fluidity in civilizations. Second graders. In third grade, DC students will be taught the importance of affirming spaces, which are described as safe spaces for people to express their identities. So whenever you hear affirming spaces, that's the code for segregated spaces. They segregate people by either sex, race, or ethnicity. Children, they're doing this too, by the way. In middle school, students will evaluate the extent to which racism, privilege, and bias have impacted global resource distribution and how resource distribution has influenced racism and imperialism. I mean, is that written by Fidel Castro or what? By seventh grade, students are introduced to the European colonizer, and they will scrutinize how liberty, freedom, and democracy were applied to different Americans on the basis of religion, socioeconomic status, or class, race, and gender. Eighth graders will learn how protest can lead to change, and they will investigate how media and social media can shape the way the public understands an issue. In high school, the high school courses will include Eurocentrism and its lasting impact on people of color, as well as the effects of colonization on indigenous people. And their definition of indigenous is obviously so leftist as to, belie belief. Classes will also focus on the invention of race as a social construct and how primarily white men fought for their rights while simultaneously oppressing others, such as women, black, indigenous, and other people of color. And they'll go on, and finally high school seniors on their way out will be given their Hate America card. That's not literally there, but this is what they're being asked to learn. You'll see what I mean in joking about it, about the shortcomings of democracy in the U.S. and the ways that Black, Indigenous, and people of color, as well as queer youth, are impacting change. So does this sound like something that kids should be taught, or does this sound like something that the Democratic Party is concocting in order to create a new generation of Marxist activists to promote their socialist, radical communist agenda that is based on attacking people on the basis of race, destroying the basis for American civilization, undermining our founding principles? When you look in the details here, this is a charitable interpretation of it. They talk about intersectionality. Look up intersectionality. You can see it's just CRT to the max. I mean, this document is critical race theory on steroids. 160 pages of brainwashing children from kindergarten through high school. And it will all happen unless Congress acts with the acquiescence of the United States Congress that has a constitutional obligation to manage the affairs of the District of Columbia. So I tell you what, if you don't like this, you need to call your member of Congress. You need to call your senator, call your congressman. You can call them at 202-225-3121 and tell them what you think. Say, I just saw Judicial Watch, and they were highlighting how the DC schools are going to be teaching queer studies to children as young as kindergarten. They're going to be talking about gender identity to babies. What's going on there, Congressman? What's going on there, Senator? Are you doing your job? That's what I would say. Of course, you can say what you want because it's a free country. So you communists watching, you can call and promote this communism designed to destroy America, I guess, and hurt our children. But the rest of you patriots, I suspect you're going to call with a different point of view. So this is great work by Judicial Watch. We've already exposed a lot of this segregation, racialism, racism, CRT in schools in the DC region as it is. We've been in court trying to stop the critical race theory agenda, often successfully, specifically in California, where they were trying to impose quotas on private boards based on race, identity, sexual identity and ethnicity, all sorts of characteristics that you're not supposed to require quotas about. And we're involved in litigation where in Minneapolis, they have a school contract that it's a union contract where if there are layoffs, it's usually the more senior people are protected, unless they're white. Then blacks get special protection, or other aggrieved minorities. It's not clear what standards they're applying. And when it comes to rehiring, people of a certain race get put in the front of the line. And that's outrageously racist and unconstitutional and illegal. And outrageously, a court said, well, that may save money. So maybe it's okay. So we're fighting that battle. And of course, we're also helping parents and teachers who have been abused for opposing this type of curriculum, this critical race theory brainwashing. And as I've talked about earlier, we've been suing to gain access to the records about the brainwashing using this repackaged Marxism known as critical race theory, targeting our rising military leadership in our military academies. Do you want the rising officer corps to be indoctrinated with this anti-Americanism? I don't. I prefer our military leadership see America as something worth fighting for, not something worth fighting against. Our country is under attack from within by critical race theory. And Judicial Watch has made it a priority to expose it and stop it wherever we can. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.